Have you ever wondered why more and more older adults are seeking love and companionship in their later years? In this video, we dive deep into the personal journeys of seniors navigating the complex and often challenging modern dating world. You'll hear real stories from people like Michael and Carol, whose experiences shed light on the emotional needs and obstacles faced by older individuals in their quest for meaningful relationships. But that's just the beginning. Stick around as we explore the growing popularity of dating programs tailored specifically for older adults, uncover the societal shifts that are driving this trend, and listen to expert insights on the psychological toll of loneliness and the importance of love later in life. You'll discover how, despite the passage of time, sincerity and kindness remain the foundation of lasting relationships, regardless of age. Stay with us until the end, and you'll gain a profound understanding of the enduring power of love and the unique dynamics involved in finding a life partner in your golden years. Whether you're looking for inspiration, seeking to relate to others, or simply curious about this growing phenomenon, this video provides compelling reasons to keep watching and reflecting on the true meaning of companionship. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's a great time to hit that subscribe button and activate the notification bell so you won't miss any of our future videos. Your support means the world to me, and if you enjoyed this video, you can help spread these important lessons by liking and sharing it with others. If this topic resonates with you, please comment 1. If you think there's something I can improve on, comment 0 to let me know how I can create better content for you. Now, let's get started. I shared my thoughts with the building manager in my apartment complex, hoping she could help me find someone compatible. Not long after, she came back to me with some good news. There was indeed someone who seemed like a good match. Her name was Linda, and she had retired a couple of years ago. She was 13 years younger than me, and she agreed to meet so we could get to know each other. That day, I decided to dress up in my favorite outfit, even dyeing my hair a little to feel a bit younger. Feeling a mix of excitement and nerves, I headed to the small park nearby where we had agreed to meet. I was early, so I ended up pacing back and forth, waiting for over half an hour. After a few laps around the park, I finally saw her. From a distance, I noticed that she was slim, with a graceful figure. The building manager introduced us, and then she left us alone to chat along the park's winding path. Linda introduced herself as a 52-year-old retired professional. She mentioned that her son was still single, and she had been divorced for more than 10 years. As we exchanged a bit about our lives, she quickly suggested we go to my apartment to continue the conversation. Her proposal took me by surprise. "If we're both happy with how things go," she said, "I'd like to move in with you soon. We can start by getting to know each other better at your place." Before I could process it, she grabbed my hand and added, "Let's go take a look at your home, and then we can stop by the store to pick up some ingredients. I'll cook you something special." I was taken aback by her boldness. It all felt a bit too fast for me, so I gently pulled my hand back and suggested, "Let's stay here and chat for a little while longer." She seemed to realize she was moving a bit too quickly and awkwardly withdrew her hand. "All right," she said with a smile, "go ahead. What's on your mind?" I had a pretty clear idea of what I was looking for in a life partner, so I didn't mince words. I told her, "I'm looking for someone who has a good level of knowledge, someone who can hold her own in social situations, and who presents herself with maturity." Linda paused for a moment, then let out a small laugh. "You can't handle that?" "Why not?" she asked. I explained that while her appearance was perfectly fine, the age difference between us was significant. I was concerned that our different life stages might make it difficult for us to connect on a deeper level. When she heard that, Linda burst out laughing. It was a light-hearted response, and when she regained her composure, I asked her what her expectations were for a partner. To my surprise, Linda turned out to be very direct and assertive. She looked me in the eye and said, "I like men like you. I'm willing to live with you, and if you're okay with my 4 conditions, I'd even be open to marriage." She smiled warmly and added, "You're the first honest older man I've met in all of these dating meetings." If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 1 below to let me know that you are still here with me. Then, with sincerity, she began outlining her 4 requests, each one accompanied by an explanation of why it was important to her. Her first request was that if we were both happy with how things were going, we would live together on a trial basis for 6 months. However, before we could take that step, she insisted that I sign an agreement. In it, I would be required to give her a sum of money, $2,000, as a security deposit. She explained that this amount would serve as a symbol of my sincerity and help reassure her that I was truly committed to making this work. She was clear, if, after the trial period, things didn't work out between us, she would return a portion of the money based on how long we had lived together, allowing us to part on good terms. At first, I wasn't sure what to make of her request. I understood that she wanted some form of assurance, but the idea of putting money on the table so quickly felt a bit unusual. Still, she seemed genuine, and I could tell she was trying to protect herself emotionally. I thought about it for a while, and while I wasn't fully comfortable with the arrangement, I respected her straightforwardness. It made me realize just how serious she was about wanting to make sure both of us felt secure. Her second request was a bit more extravagant. She suggested that, since we were both getting older, it would be the perfect time for us to take a trip together. She dreamed of visiting the southern part of the country, somewhere beautiful with wide open skies, and she wanted us to take a wedding photo album during the trip. However, this wasn't just a weekend getaway. She envisioned a trip that would last at least a month. And in her mind, all the expenses for this adventure would be my responsibility. She assured me that she would be a wonderful travel companion, looking after me, and making sure I felt comfortable and at ease throughout the journey. If the cost seemed too high, she said, we could always scale it down and go somewhere nearby. But the wedding photo album is non-negotiable. It's been a lifelong dream of mine, and I've always wanted to have a beautiful album to remember such an important chapter in my life. I had to admit, the idea of spending so much money on a trip, let alone one that involved creating a wedding photo album, was difficult to wrap my head around. I considered myself a practical person, and though I wasn't opposed to travel or the idea of enjoying time together, her request felt somewhat juvenile. At 52, she was still clinging to a fantasy of romance that seemed a bit too idealistic for someone of her age. For a moment, I thought about excusing myself and leaving. The whole situation felt a little too much for me. But then I thought about the building manager, who had introduced us, and I wasn't sure how to explain walking out without making things awkward. So, I decided to stay seated and listen a little longer. Linda noticed my hesitation and the slight impatience in my demeanor. "Do you want me to keep going?" she asked, sensing that I wasn't fully on board with the idea. I gave her an awkward smile and nodded, signaling for her to continue. Her third request was, to put it bluntly, a bit much. After we'd lived together on a trial basis for 6 months, she told me that she wanted us to officially register for marriage. But here's where things got interesting. She made it clear that once we were married, she expected to take on a dominant role in the household. Specifically, she said that I would need to hand over my pension card to her. Every month, she would give me a set amount for personal spending money, and anything beyond that limit would come with a penalty in the form of housework. At first, I wasn't sure if I was hearing her correctly. Was she asking me to turn over control of my pension? The idea of a fixed allowance for myself, alongside the threat of punishment if I exceeded that amount, struck me as something more suited for a child's game or a controlling relationship dynamic, not something that belonged in the life of someone who had lived through many years of experience and hardships. I've been through my share of ups and downs in life. I've learned a lot, especially about respect and trust in relationships. The notion that marriage would come with such rigid, transactional expectations didn't sit well with me. In the past, I had seen relationships built on partnership, equality, and mutual respect. The idea of having to ask for permission to spend my own money felt completely foreign to me. But there she was, sitting across from me, completely serious. For a moment, I couldn't help but feel like I was talking to someone who hadn't truly understood what a mature, healthy relationship looked like. I considered how to respond, but I found myself speechless, unsure of how to even begin explaining how misplaced her expectations were. Her fourth request seemed a bit unconventional, especially given the way she had already set the tone for our relationship. She explained that after being divorced for more than 10 years, she had grown used to sleeping alone. Whether we were living together on a trial basis or officially married, she insisted that we would need to sleep in separate rooms and beds so as not to disturb each other. At first, I tried to understand her perspective. Perhaps she was simply accustomed to her independence and needed that space. I didn't judge her for wanting personal space, but the way she phrased it made me feel like she was already making decisions about our relationship that didn't allow for much room for adjustment or compromise. But then, she continued listing the positives. She assured me that, if we did end up living together, she would take full responsibility for all the housework, especially around the holidays. She promised to cook delicious, extravagant meals that would make me feel so at home, I wouldn't want to leave. I couldn't deny that her offer sounded appealing on some level. Who wouldn't enjoy a home-cooked meal made with love? It almost felt like she was trying to win me over through my stomach. She seemed to believe that with enough care, time, and effort, I'd be won over by the promise of good food and a tidy home. She called herself a fresh flower that would never wilt, emphasizing how she could offer me warmth and comfort in my later years. There was a certain charm to her optimism, but at the same time, it made me question. In this day and age, are there still women out there with such traditional views on relationships? It made sense, in a way. After all, she'd been living alone for more than a decade after her divorce, so perhaps she had never fully adjusted to modern relationship dynamics. I was taken aback, but I also couldn't ignore the underlying truth. We weren't looking for the same things in life. While her requests seemed sincere in her way, they felt more like a business arrangement than a partnership based on equality and shared values. I politely told her that, unfortunately, I couldn't meet her requests. I didn't want to drag out the conversation further, so I came up with a quick excuse to leave. The truth was, I was afraid that if I lingered too long, I'd be forced into more discussions about her plans. I didn't want either of us to feel stuck in an uncomfortable situation. As I walked away from the park, I reflected on everything she'd said. It wasn't that I didn't understand her needs or her desires. It was that the foundation of what she wanted was based on very different values than what I was looking for in a partner. For me, the most important qualities in a relationship, whether young or old, are sincerity and kindness. Without those two pillars, everything else falls apart. No matter how young, beautiful, or well-meaning a person is, without honesty and mutual respect, they are just a distraction or even an obstacle to the life you want to build. I realized then that I wasn't desperate for a partner just to fill the space. I wasn't willing to settle for a temporary connection that would leave me feeling frustrated or unfulfilled. If I couldn't find a life partner who shared my values and approach to life, then I'd rather live alone. Life was too short to settle for less than what I truly needed and deserved. The phenomenon of elderly people remarrying has become an increasingly significant topic of discussion in recent years. The reasons behind this trend are deep and thought-provoking. One of the key factors contributing to this surge is the growing popularity of dating programs for seniors, especially after the tremendous success of shows like Late Life Love Isn't Too Late, Duyan Muon Chong Muon. These programs have captivated viewers with their candid and direct approach to dating, which is refreshing to many. What stands out the most is the blunt honesty of the participants, especially the women. Comments like, "You're not my type, honestly, I don't trust you, maybe you should find a younger man," or "If we don't match, move on to the next person," have left audiences both shocked and entertained. It's a stark contrast to the more polite, cautious approach typical in younger dating circles. Viewers are drawn to the no-nonsense attitude of the elderly participants. "I love watching elderly dating programs," one viewer commented. "They keep it short and to the point," said another. And indeed, compared to younger participants, elderly individuals are often more straightforward and candid. Having lived through a lifetime of experiences, both good and bad, they know exactly what they want and need in a partner. There's a certain confidence that comes with age, a level of self-awareness that allows them to be honest about their desires. They have lived through broken marriages, lost careers, and sometimes near-death experiences. Dating at this age, in many ways, is like wine. It gets better with age. As the saying goes, ginger older, hotter. However, behind the humor and lively nature of these dating shows, there are often darker realities of elderly life that are rarely discussed. The reality of loneliness, regret, and the deep emotional needs of older individuals are the often unspoken aspects of this growing trend. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment below to let me know that you are still here with me. According to the latest population census, the elderly population in the United States has risen to over 54 million, with more than 10 million elderly Americans living alone. Notably, nearly 1 million elderly individuals are divorced or widowed, creating an undeniable trend of loneliness among the senior population. As life expectancy increases, so does the number of seniors who find themselves navigating life without a partner, which can be emotionally and physically challenging. The rise in dating programs for the elderly isn't just a passing trend, it's a reflection of the deeper emotional void many seniors feel. The loneliness behind the trends. Mrs. Tran Thursday Lawn, an editor of the popular show Late Life Love Isn't Too Late, shared some insights into this growing issue. She mentioned that many elderly people feel a profound sense of loneliness, especially when their children have grown up and moved away. Many participants in these dating programs have lived through significant life challenges. Some lost their jobs in middle age, some have experienced the heartbreak of failed marriages, others deal with chronic health issues, and some even grapple with the looming reality of death. After living through the ups and downs of life, many seniors reach a point where they realize that material comfort is no longer enough. They desire companionship, emotional connection, and the joy of sharing their remaining years with someone who understands their experiences. Despite being financially stable, many elderly individuals choose to remarry in their later years. The reasons behind this are complex. Often, these remarriages aren't driven by superficial desires like wealth or social status, but by deeper emotional needs. Loneliness, the desire for intimacy, and the need for mutual care and companionship become paramount as they face the realities of aging. The frustrations that come with aging, coupled with the sorrow of lost opportunities, make these emotional voids all the more significant. A new perspective on love. Take, for example, Mrs. Hoa, a 62-year-old woman who participated in one of these dating programs. When asked about her expectations of a partner, she set two simple requirements: good character and a non-smoker. Based on these criteria, the program paired her with Mr. Ben, a 63-year-old retired factory worker who had been widowed for 4 years. He received a modest pension of $250 a month, and while he lived with his son, he found himself feeling lonely and wishing to share his life with someone else. At first, everything seemed promising. The two hit it off, with Mr. Ben even feeling hopeful about a potential match. But soon after their initial meetings, Mrs. Hoa began to raise new demands that left him confused. She requested that he purchase a full set of household appliances worth about $600, a gold bracelet worth over $200, and contribute half of his monthly pension to her. Mr. Ben was taken aback. "We've barely just met," he thought, "and she's already making these demands? How can I possibly agree to that?" Despite his reservations, Mr. Ben tried to remain open. However, he couldn't shake the feeling that Mrs. Hoa's expectations were unrealistic, especially considering their short history. Some viewers of the show, aware of her past experiences, were more sympathetic. Mrs. Hoa had been through many hardships. Her previous marriage had ended in divorce, and like many seniors, she found herself facing the complexities of loneliness, financial stress, and the search for emotional stability in the latter years of life. Her situation is not unique. Many elderly individuals, particularly those who have experienced loss, are drawn to remarry for reasons that go beyond simple companionship. They seek stability, emotional support, and a sense of purpose as they age. Yet, sometimes, the expectations they carry into new relationships can be mismatched with the reality of their financial or emotional circumstances. The unspoken reality of elderly dating. As much as the media portrays elderly dating as a fun, sometimes comical spectacle, the deeper truths of these stories reveal a more complicated picture. The increased desire for remarriage among the elderly is driven by very real needs for connection, emotional support, and intimacy. But at the same time, the demands and expectations placed on these relationships are often a reflection of years of unmet emotional needs, personal insecurities, and past regrets. The rise of dating programs for seniors highlights a growing trend, but it also sheds light on a critical issue. As people age, they still need love, companionship, and a sense of belonging. While some may approach new relationships with lighthearted humor, for many others, the search for a life partner is about much more than just filling a void. It's about seeking out the comfort and support of a partner who understands their journey, a journey that, for many, has been full of both joy and sorrow. 2 failed marriages and Mrs. Hoa's heartfelt struggles. Mrs. Hoa's journey through love and heartbreak was far from easy. Having endured 2 failed marriages, her experiences are a testament to the emotional scars left by toxic relationships. Her first marriage was marked by years of suffering. Her husband, an alcoholic, became abusive when drunk, unleashing violence and anger on the family. In her younger years, Mrs. Hoa couldn't control him and was forced to endure his outbursts. The constant tension at home sent her into a deep depression, but she remained because her daughter, just 8 years old at the time, needed her mother. She stayed, hoping that things would change, but instead, the abuse worsened. Her husband grew more emboldened, confident that she would never leave. It wasn't until her daughter grew older that Mrs. Hoa found the strength to leave her first husband. By then, she thought she had learned what to look for in a partner, believing that she could finally choose wisely. But her second marriage proved to be even worse. Her second husband, who was 4 years younger than her, initially appeared sincere. They had a son together, and for a time, Mrs. Hoa believed that this new marriage might offer the happiness she had longed for. But soon after their son was born, the cracks began to show. Her second husband turned out to be lazy, irresponsible, and, to her dismay, unfaithful. He refused to work, and she was left to shoulder the financial burden on her own. He demanded money for cigarettes and alcohol, while secretly carrying on affairs. Despite all of this, Mrs. Hoa, wanting to give her son a stable home, tried to make the marriage work. But in the end, her second husband abandoned her with nothing more than a letter, leaving her to pick up the pieces of her life. It took her 3 long years to heal from the psychological wounds of that betrayal. These painful experiences of being betrayed by men she loved and trusted left Mrs. Hoa with deep emotional scars. The demand she placed on a future partner, such as the desire for financial stability, security, and commitment, are not born out of greed but from the lessons she learned the hard way. As the saying goes, once you fall, you get up again. Yet, at her age, after having given so much of herself to unworthy partners, she could no longer afford to be naive. Now, facing the possibility of another relationship, she set seemingly high standards, but these demands were her way of protecting herself from further hurt. Mrs. Hoa's story is not an isolated one. Many older women have walked a similar path, loving deeply, giving unconditionally, and sacrificing their happiness to build a family, only to be betrayed by their partners. After years of trauma, these women are often left with a deep sense of insecurity. They once believed in love, but after the heartbreak and betrayal, they become more pragmatic. What may seem like unreasonable demands to an outsider are often the result of years of emotional pain and broken trust. They have learned the hard way that in life, you cannot give everything to someone who isn't worthy of it. In the dating world for older adults, particularly for those who have lived through failed marriages, setting boundaries and demands is not something to be ashamed of. Holding on to unresolved frustrations or fears from past relationships can be far more damaging. If elderly people truly want to live happy, fulfilling lives, they must be able to openly address practical matters, such as finances, living arrangements, and emotional needs, from the start. Psychologist Erik Erikson famously said that people can only face death calmly if they look back on their lives and feel that the years they've lived were meaningful, happy, and complete. In their later years, elderly individuals may seek love not just for companionship, but because they value the time they have left and want to make the most of it. As people age, they become more attuned to the importance of love, affection, and emotional connection. While younger individuals may take these things for granted, seniors understand the preciousness of time. Love in old age may seem unusual to some, but for those who have lived through hardship and loss, it is often more important than ever. The reality of elderly dating and the search for connection. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 3 below to let me know that you are still here with me. One of the most touching moments in late-life love isn't too late, Duyan Muon Chong Muon, involved an elderly man who left a lasting impression on viewers. This man had cared for his wife for 5 years after she suffered a debilitating stroke. After her death, he couldn't bear the loneliness that followed. Just 23 days after her passing, he joined a dating program in search of companionship. There, he met a woman who had been living alone for 23 years since losing her husband. She shared that whether it had been 23 days or 23 years, the loneliness felt the same. Although this man had spent years caring for his wife, he found that the pain of loss was something he could never fully overcome. The wounds left by years of caring for a sick spouse, coupled with the deep loneliness he felt after her death, made it impossible for him to face the remainder of his life alone. On the show, the two held hands, and the next morning, they shared a simple breakfast. The tenderness in their smiles left viewers emotional. For both of them, finding companionship in their later years brought a sense of peace and connection that had been missing for so long. This story serves as a reminder of the human need for connection, especially in the later years of life. As people age, the desire for companionship doesn't diminish. In fact, it often intensifies. The simple act of holding hands or sharing a meal can bring a sense of fulfillment that is hard to describe. At an age when many are faced with the reality of their mortality, love and companionship become even more significant. However, the lives of older adults are not without uncertainties. There is no guarantee that the current partner will walk with them to the end of their days. While holding hands and walking through life together is a beautiful wish, it's also important to acknowledge that sometimes the wisest choice is to live alone rather than risk entering a relationship that may bring more pain than joy. Life is unpredictable, and sometimes the greatest peace comes from self-sufficiency and emotional resilience. As we reflect on the complexities of love, companionship, and emotional healing in later life, what have you learned from today's video? Mrs. Ho's journey shows us how our past experiences shape our expectations in relationships, and why it's so important to approach new connections with emotional wisdom and clarity. Whether it's learning to set boundaries, understanding the deep emotional needs behind remarriage, or finding the strength to heal after betrayal, there are invaluable lessons we can take into our own lives. I'd love to hear what resonated with you today. What's one key takeaway you'll bring into practice in your own life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you liked this video, please leave a comment, like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more content that helps you navigate life, relationships, and emotional well-being in your later years. Thank you for watching, and remember, it's never too late to seek love, healing, and personal growth.